Cool. So this is the slide we finished on yesterday. So we'll just go through. As I say, there's not too many slides in which we have to complete. For this session, I'll just be going through some supportive language strategies aimed at preventing relapse and looking at managing withdrawal symptoms. So I say there's not too many left to do on the slide deck. So supportive language, why is it important to use supportive language when working with participants? And just put it into the chat so you can speak out. Mandy, to make them feel comfortable and at ease. Michelle, to allow the clients to open up. Anyone else? Siobhan says build rapport. Perfect. So it helps boost motivation to quit or sustain that change. It helps acknowledge the positive steps they have taken thus far, and it helps the participant to feel supported and encouraged rather than judged. So it's obviously really important to make sure that they're not feeling judged. We take each participant, as we were talking about yesterday, that person-centered approach. So making sure that even if there is a lapse, that we are continuing that support and making sure that we're telling them, like we mentioned yesterday, how far they've come. It's just a moment in time, and that they can get back to where they've previously been. So we'll just have a look now at some phrases. So just put in the chat whether you think each of the following statements are helpful or unhelpful. So the first one here is, you need to set a quit date and stick to it. If you don't manage to stop smoking by week 4, your file will be closed. Straight in there, Mandy has unhelpful. Looks like it's a full house. Yeah, extremely unhelpful. It's telling the participant that, you know, they've got basically one shot here, and if they don't do it, that the opportunity for them to gain support from you as a coach is closed. So not very helpful, putting a lot of pressure on the participants. What caused your lapse? You really need to think about the health risks smoking causes, helpful or unhelpful. So we've got 1 helpful in the chat, 2, full house. So Mandy, depends on how it's said.
I was just thinking then, you know, when we talked about tone of voice and stuff yesterday, I think it depends how you say that. Do you know what I mean? You could say it in, I don't know, maybe I'm overthinking it, but do you get what I mean?
No, totally. Also as well, when thinking about the COM-B model, the motivation, not everyone is motivated by the health aspects. It might even be a consideration for them. So yes, this is considered unhelpful. The very first part, what caused your lapse? That's good. You're getting more information to help then guide the conversation. But you really need to think about the health risks. You're then passing judgment as if you're saying that this what you've done is bad. I don't know if anyone can remember the cost of the to the NHS that we mentioned yesterday, the billions. So, and exactly as Mandy says, how you say something. So, if you were speaking to a participant over a number of weeks and you had mentioned that, you know, a friend, family member is struggling to access an NHS service, you know, they needed support, and you were finding it, you know, just frustrating and so forth, and then you say you really need to think about the health risks, you know, that's you then putting pressure on them to say, well, you're putting pressure on the NHS, therefore my friend, family member is struggling because people like you are. That's how it can come across. So, as Mandy says, it's really important to be careful with your tone, what you say, being mindful. And then the last one, you've managed 2 weeks smoke-free. That's great. How do you think we could work together to sustain that? So helpful, unhelpful. Yeah, so everyone's gone helpful. Yeah, exactly right. So you've managed 2 weeks smoke-free. That's great. So by saying that's great, we are congratulating the participants in the achievement thus far. And then you're looking at how can you work together. So like I said there yesterday as well, that goals are best achieved when they're participant led, but it's great when a coach can support that using the SMART principle. So by asking them, how can we work together? What support do you need from me? What is the end goal? And let's work together to find ways to achieving that. And because they might need some type of support and don't know that you can provide it. If we go back again to the COM-B, you know, it might be the knowledge, so the capability. It might be, you know, further signposting to something else that's gonna, you know, help them continue on that journey. So we've got some verbal and non-verbal communication. We've got some acronyms here. So we first of all, we've got LEAPS, and this is listen, empathize, ask, paraphrase, and summarize. So you want to listen to the participants, making sure you're getting all the information that they are telling you. That not only supports in building rapport, but will support in the opportunities or support that you can provide. Empathize. So with empathy, you don't need to have the lived experience of being a previous smoker. You'll be able to, be more aware of empathy the more participants that you meet. You'll get to hear a lot of different stories, but a lot of the same themes as well. By having that experience then with the more participants you support, the easier it will be to empathize and support. So always asking, so we mentioned there yesterday as well, having open-ended questions and making sure that we're not jumping in to try and finish sentences when we do ask those questions, allowing the participants to speak, give their full thoughts, full story. So paraphrase, so similar to summarizing, you want to condense that information and tell it back to the participant. One, it gives clarity between you and the participant. Is that exactly what they're saying? Have you understood it? It allows the participant to hear the information that they've just said back to themselves, to allow them to make any changes to what they said. Like I mentioned, some participants coming into smoking cessation service is it could be their first time, they could be nervous. So leaps is just a good way to think of how you build that rapport. And then you've got palms. So this would be more for your video calls and face-to-face. So what position, so how you've set up, if it's a desk, if it's face-to-face, is there a full desk between you and the participant, or is it just a corner so that you are not building a barrier between them and you? Sometimes that can come across as hierarchy. Your attitudes, so like I said, making sure we don't judge, treating everyone with respect, empathizing with their situation. Look and listen. Obviously, it can be difficult to look and listen when you're trying to take notes as well. But with practice, you'll be able to do shorthand notes, but making sure you're listening, paraphrasing back to them. Making space, so like I said, with the desk, making sure there's no barriers between you and your participant, and stance as well. So you just want to make sure the environment is set up, that there's no barriers, that it's welcome, opening. You don't want to have arms folded, closed posture. You want to be open and welcoming, and this allows the participant to feel more at ease, and hopefully then they'll open up a bit more, and that'll help build a rapport and give you more information to support the participant. So communication breakdown. The way we communicate is largely responsible for the way we are interpreted by and interpret others. But this is not always the cause of a communication breakdown. So what examples can you think of that could cause a communication breakdown with a participant? So just put some into the chat. Shell's put in interrupting or looking away when the client is talking. Mark speaking too quickly. Mandy, if they're unclear on the objectives you've both set. So some great stuff coming into the chat there. I'll start showing you what we have. So use of language. So like I mentioned yesterday, being jargon free. So the more you work in smoking cessation, tobacco dependency programs, you'll use acronyms like NRT. A participant may not be aware of NRT as an acronym. So making sure that it's jargon free, speaking clearly is really important. The environment, too loud, quiet. So again, depends on if it's face-to-face, remote. For instance, for me delivering the training yesterday and this morning, it is extremely warm, but I have to close my windows because I live on a main road, and yeah, you wouldn't be able to hear me. So if you're working remotely, making sure that you can avoid having loud noises in the background. Similarly with face-to-face, making sure the environment's set up that conversation can happen at normal voice level in which they can hear you and you can hear them as well. Stress or anger, to say they could be stressed, angry with something in their own personal lives, and it's something that, you know, it's important to, when a participant comes into an appointment with yourself, you know, helps build that rapport. How are you? How you doing? And things like that. There may be something that might have had a stressful situation in the car park. They're angry at somebody else. Somebody cut them off. Empathizing with them will help, you know, lower their stress, their anger, bring them back to why they've come to the appointment. Influence of substances. So yeah, we sort of touched on it yesterday. Some people that maybe smoke tobacco also smoke cannabis. So someone could come to a face-to-face appointment under the influence of a drug or alcohol. So making sure that you follow any procedures there, report it using the incident reporting form. confusion. So let's see. So Mandy had mentioned unclear objectives you both set. So if you're not on the same page as your participant, that's why I've continually said that a goal is best, participant led, but with your support. So making sure that you understand them and they understand you. Summarizing, paraphrasing, so that you and the participants are very clear on what has taken place in that appointment and what is expected of the participant, and maybe from you for the next appointment. You might have said that, oh, you'll between now and your next appointment do this, and I'll look at finding various signposting for you for, they might want to take up a new activity or something. So making sure that you're both responsible for doing those actions. Stereotyping. So again, like I said, don't be having any prejudgments. We did mention as well, and Dale mentioned around culture. Just because someone is from a certain culture doesn't mean that they take part in all aspects of that culture. So making sure we're not stereotyping, we're taking each participant as they come, and taking the information that they give and using it, and going down a person-centered approach, so that we treat every participant like an individual. Misinformation. So it's important that you, as a coach, expel any myths that a participant has. For instance, one of the big ones is during pregnancy, they'll have a smaller baby, so an easier birth, which is misinformation. And then also as well, making sure that any information that myself or the clinical team send out for any updates within tobacco dependency, smoking cessation, that you take the time to read those. So within smoking cessation, things can change. Medications, new ones can come on the market, ones can come off the market. It might be something with an NRT product, and making sure that you're not giving poor information to your participant as well. So you have that responsibility to keep up to date with your CPD and break down any of the misinformation that they have maybe heard from friends, family members as well. Physical pain, poor health. Someone, as I said, could be going through something, and smoking cessation is no longer a priority, and that can break down between yourself and the participants, that communication, that barrier. They're seeking supports, and that's their main objective at the minute, is to get support with their poor health, their ailment. Then they may look to continue their tobacco dependency support. Cultural differences, so kind of touched on that there. Dale had mentioned yesterday, with different cultures may take part in, various like shisha pipes and so forth. So making sure that you are aware of the different cultural differences is really important. It helps you, as I say, build rapport with that participant as well. So the Atari box, so your attitude is linked to your behaviors, which links to their attitudes and their behaviors. So it's just a cycle. So a coach has positive attitudes that can have rub off on a participant, and it also works in the opposite. So if you have a negative attitude, that could give the participant a bad experience, and this will be unhelpful in their quit attempt. You know, we've mentioned about tone, pitch, is, you know, your body language, so on and so forth. If you're not having eye contact, repeating things back to show that you're really engaged in supporting them. So your attitudes, your behaviors can rub off on the participant. So trying to make sure that you come every day to your practice with good attitudes, good behaviors, and taking each participant as an individual. Just because, let's say you had an appointment at 9 a.m. and it was an extremely difficult appointment, and making sure you don't carry that into your next appointment, as I say, because that could have negative impacts then for that participant and their experience. So, as I said, establish that link between attitude and behavior. Positive attitude creates a virtuous cycle of positive behaviors. So that's why it's important as well that you aim to try and increase the attitude of the participants, make them more positive. Then hopefully that will make their behaviors a lot more positive as well, making them want to engage a lot more with the service. And the more a participant will engage in the service, the likelihood of successful outcome. So strategies aimed at preventing relapse. So evidence for effective relapse prevention strategies is lacking, but there are a number of approaches we can use as part of a participant's support plan. So not a puff rule. So remind participants of the nature of tobacco dependence and reinforce the importance of maintaining the not a puff rule. Extend pharmaceutical therapy, so increase the amount, frequency of use or longer term use NRT, e-cigarettes, or stop smoking medications. Just so you're aware that we can't extend them on our program in terms of supplying more NRT. So the participants must get their own NRT for extension or contact their GP for more medications once, you know, the program does end. So in that instance there, just make the participant aware of that. Plan alternative solutions. So prompt participants to anticipate cravings and to actively practice the alternatives when the feelings arise, if they plan. So it's important as well, like I said yesterday, supporting the participant to come up with some coping strategies. The more coping strategies they have the better. Some may work in some environments and some may not. So it's important to have like a bank of coping strategies that you can help the participants build, so that they can use, especially on program, but more so as well when they leave program. Reminders of benefits. So participants have continued benefits of staying smoke-free and personal motives. So that comes back to that building that rapport. Some people may be motivated by financial reasons. It might be that they've had a health scare. It might be a family member has a health scare. It might even be they're giving up because a partner wants to give up in the same household. It might be they've just had a child, so they don't want to smoke around their child. Lots of different reasons why people will come to the program. And it's important, like I said, to build that rapport so that you can always remind the participant why they're on this journey. It goes back to a couple of slides ago where it was unhelpful, where if you'd mentioned, think of the health risks. So not everyone will be motivated by that. So making sure what was their motivating factor. Goes back to as well making sure that you've good notes on your CRM, because that'll be a reminder. You know, you may have caseload somewhere between 40 and 60 participants, so it's hard to keep track of everyone just from the knowledge in your head. That's why it's important to have good notes that you can refer to. And like I mentioned as well, if you are off sick and another colleague's coming in to pick up that appointment, having good notes will allow them to support that participant better as well. And enlist support of friends and family. It's important that that they have the support around them. It can be really difficult. The example I just used there of a partner. So if someone comes on to the program and a partner is still smoking in the same house, or if they're lived in shared accommodation, and someone in the house is smoking and they actually smoke in the house, they move outside, it can be a lot more difficult. So speaking to the participant, asking them about what support they have around them. Are their family supportive, or are friends saying, "Oh, we all smoke, why would you quit?" So on and so forth. So more information, as I said, you know, the better. So lapses and relapses, cutting down or quitting can take many attempts. With support, individuals are up to 4 times more likely to quit successfully, but there are many factors that can impact this later on. What is the difference between a lapse and a relapse? Does anyone know? I'd like to put it into the chat. So Mark, a lapse is a one-off event where someone has one cigarette, whereas a relapse is where they've begun smoking again more than one. So, Mark, we may ask you to deliver the training in the future. So yeah, a lapse is a short or one-time return to smoking when trying to remain smoke-free, and a relapse is when someone who has previously managed to quit completely goes back to smoking at the previous amount, frequency, or similar. It is normal to experience a lapse or relapse, and it is possible to lapse without it becoming a relapse. How can we support? So think of the COM-B model. Siobhan's put in, make sure you discuss how positive their journey's been so far. Maddie, don't break the person, remind them how far they've come, reinforce original reasons for stop smoking. Ask if there's a particular trigger. Check their motivation to quit smoking again immediately if they relapse. Some great stuff in the chat there. So yeah, so similar to the COM-B model. So giving them the knowledge, so finding out why they may had a lapse, finding out was it a particular trigger and having support there, as we mentioned there, with support, individuals are 4 times more likely. So that's the support of a behavior coach as well. So giving them that opportunity still to continue on the program. So it is coach discretion if it's a lapse or a relapse in terms of a quit attempt, and reminding them of the motivation and checking is that still the motivation, for them to remain quit. So managing withdrawal symptoms, unlike alcohol and some other substances, withdrawal symptoms from nicotine are temporary and has no associated risks. So how quickly a person recovers from their symptoms is reliant upon level of dependence, health, and personal coping strategy. So in terms of withdrawal symptoms from nicotine, so there might be a trigger. Those symptoms will rise, they will peak, then continue to fall, and then you'll go back into recovery. So it's like a wave. It's a good representation to use to remind participants of this. So how long does the average craving last? So a typical craving will usually pass within 10 minutes. Most intense cravings are experienced during days 2 and 3 after quitting. In a complete quit, cravings should stop around week 6. Acknowledging a craving can be more beneficial than resisting against it. So being aware of this. So like I said, not every smoking cessation coach has lived experience, but being aware of this information can help you one, empathize with the participant, but two, support them by giving them this knowledge that it'll usually pass within 10 minutes. You know, can they go and do something for 10 minutes to take their mind away from that craving? You know, is there something? It depends on the situation. Can they go for a walk? Can they do something around the house? You know, get out, finding out, as I say, in that rapport building what their triggers are, and trying to support them with that. So group-based interventions. So what is the purpose of group rules? So to introduce members to the group, to set expectations, what will be covered, to provide a safe environment for participants and staff. So just put in the chat A, B, or C, which one of these you think is the answer? What is the purpose of group rules? Mark's got C. Andy C. Siobhan's gone B and C. And Michelle's gone A and C. So it is C, to provide a safe environment for participants and staff. That is the main reason. Yes, you want to do set expectations within your groups, and you do want to introduce group members, but in terms of the rules, it's really important that any co-member is safe when delivering a service, and any participant that comes into a service is safe as well. So that's the environment and safe being around other people as well. Whose responsibility is it if a participant misses a session? Is it the participant, the coach, both, or unknown without root cause analysis? Siobhan straight in there with D. Mandy A. Michelle C. Mark D. So depending on the CRM system, we send out reminder texts, things like that. If that system doesn't kick in, it's not the fault of the participants or the coach. So it's unknown without root cause analysis. Things can happen that's out of the control of participants and or coaches. So you can't make judgments. If a participant does miss a session, try and get the information from them as to why they maybe missed it, and then a solution maybe could be best. You know, it might be a participant struggles with public transport, getting to a venue, struggle with Teams. So it might be that, you know, you need to give some support access in Microsoft Teams. We've got booklets and stuff on that. It might be that they struggle with a new bus route, and it might be actually more beneficial that the participant is on a remote service then. So until you dig a bit deeper, it's unknown then how you can support that participant. So the group session delivery coach handbook has been designed as a reference document to support you in your role as a smoking cessation practitioner when preparing and delivering group sessions. So inside you'll find overview of the program structure and course information, a list of training materials and resources, guidance on considerations for different participant groups, treatment options and considerations, presenters notes, including example statements, activity and interest ideas, and further reading and participant support resources. So I think you're booked in next week, Mark, for product training. So something we'll have a look at in that session in more detail. So peer support can be a great motivator in maintaining healthy habits and managing difficult situations. So what are the benefits of attending group sessions? Anyone want to put in the chat what they think are some of the benefits of attending a group session?
That should have said from, sorry, Jason, so support from the rest of the group.
No worries, thank you, Mandy. Shell support. So I think that support and from your peers is extremely important. Group is able to talk about common barriers and work together to overcome them. Good social aspect with people who have the same goal. Thank you. Some great answers there, everyone. So yeah, making connections, goal setting, recovery coaching, reassurance, experience sharing, and non-judgmental environments. So it can be really good to have that peer support around you, going through, everyone going through the exact same experience. You can then speak to one another and get their experiences. So in terms of, obviously, the more you deliver as a coach, the more knowledge that you will gain from talking to different participants, but having more people in a group will maybe help with creating more coping strategies that people can use, goal setting as well. It's easier to see someone else going through what you're going through. Also as well, some people like, if they're in a group, that they don't want to be the one person that lapses. So it gives them more accountability as well, and making sure from you as the leader of the group, making sure that it's a non-judgmental environment is hugely important. Group support is proven to be as effective as one-to-one and can increase the likelihood of successful quit by around 50% or more compared to self-help materials. So that's really important as well, to know that it's just as effective as the one-to-ones, and it can give this added experience sharing. For, we just mentioned there, what support has a participant have in terms of friends and family. Well, this can be their new support network as well. As a company, we're also looking into different ways of having support groups away from our sessions. So within our well-being hub, our product development and our continuous improvement team, we're looking at a platform in which people can safely connect with others away from the service. How can you use this information to encourage reluctant participants to try group sessions? So mainly just a few of the things I've mentioned there around having connections, having people with the shared experiences, having someone, to speak to who is going through the exact same experience as yourself. And sometimes that is easier than talking to somebody that has no clue about what you're saying, because they don't know what you're feeling, and so on and so forth. So if anyone is reluctant to join any group sessions that the service may provide, these are some of the benefits that you can then give them. So providing that knowledge that it doesn't need to be a one-to-one service, that there are aspects that you get from a group service that you don't get from a one-to-one service. So that is it regarding this part of the training. Dale has joined in, and Dale's going to go through the rest of the different treatment options and so forth, continuing the training on from yesterday. Dale, I'll hand it over to yourself. Do you want to have a break before we start that, or I'll leave that option up to you?
Yeah, up to everyone. Really, thank you, Jason. So, what we'll do, everyone, we'll get back into the knowledge consolidation part of the training. Again, this morning, we'll go through the remainder of the priority groups that we started talking about yesterday morning, and we'll also talk about addiction and dependency. And this afternoon, we'll focus on treatment. So, we just have a couple, I think. Sort of 3 or 4 priority populations to complete this morning before we finish that section. Would everyone be okay if we continued and perhaps had a break around sort of 10:30, or would anyone like to pause for a break now? No, potentially okay to continue. Great stuff, great stuff. Brilliant. What I'll do, everyone, I'll just share the slideshow. Maybe just take a few moments. Oh, gosh, here's been quite slow. Let's just give it a few moments and hopefully it'll give me the option to share the slides. Well, I think everyone, for some reason, it's been very slow in letting me share the slides. Shall we just take a 5-minute breather, perhaps, just to give me a little bit of time to share the slides? So, shall we just pause there just a few moments, everyone, and we'll come back at 10 o'clock, and hopefully the slides will be on the screen just to save us watching me trying to get things loaded. All right, thanks, everyone. See you all back in about 4 or 5 minutes. All right, everyone, welcome back. We will get started in the next few moments. Apologies for that false start. We will have a bit of a longer morning break in the next sort of 30-40 minutes as soon as we finish this section. But great to have you all back. I hope you enjoyed the last yesterday afternoon and this morning's training. Really, definitely worth keeping those kind of behavior change techniques sort of really kind of high in your mind, so that when we go through the skills practice tomorrow, you're aware of some of the kind of best practice techniques to have conversations with service users and put those skills into practice. So again, really great to see you all. Yesterday we covered kind of the legislation around tobacco control, the role of smoking services, current trends of smoking in the UK. We also looked at demographic figures as well. We had a look at smoking and health, so the different types of tobacco products out there, and the health impacts of smoking, but also the benefits of quitting. We started yesterday to have a look at these priority groups that stop smoking services are often targeted to focus on. So yesterday we focused on smoking and pregnancy, and also smoking and mental health. So before we pause for a proper morning break, we will just go through the remaining priority populations. And the first priority population that we're going to have a look at today is people with drug and alcohol dependence. So the latest stats that we've got for this priority population show that across all substance groups, smoking rate is substantially higher than for those of the general population. And hopefully you're able to see the graph that we're showing here. And it's just important for me to kind of share as I explain this graph a little bit more. So we're talking about in terms of medication dependency or addiction, opioids and non-opioids, or opiates and non-opiates. So just a heads up if anyone isn't sure, opioids are drugs that act on opioid receptors in the brain, and these are often used for moderate to severe pain, and can include codeine, tramadol, morphine, fentanyl, methadone. So these are some medications that individuals can become addicted to. Non-opiates refer to pain medications that don't act on opioid receptors. These include NSAIDs, including ibuprofen, naproxen, also paracetamol, some antidepressants such as amitriptyline as well. So these are the type of medications that we are referring to. So interestingly, if we take a look at the graph, where back in sort of 2022, 2023, the smoking rate in the general population was around 12.1% for women and just under 16% for men. For those addicted to opiate medications, the rate of smoking in those individuals was around 64-66%. For those dependent on non-opiate medications, again, just under 60%. For those who are dependent on non-opiates and alcohol, so those medications and alcohol dependency, around 63-62% smoking rate in that group. And for those who have an alcohol dependency, the smoking rate is around 40 to 42%. So we can say really that as a general rule, as a bit of an average, the smoking rate is around 3 times higher in those with a drug and alcohol dependency than compared with the general population. So this is a really important population that we should definitely aim to support on our stop smoking services. So the latest data we have available is that in terms of individuals who are accessing support for a substance or alcohol dependency, nearly 40,000 or 49% of those individuals said that they had smoked tobacco in the 28 days before starting that treatment. Only 4% of those were recorded as having been offered a referral to a stop smoking service. So there's definitely a gap in providing the opportunity or encouraging those individuals to consider stopping tobacco, as well as getting support for other substances and alcohol. And smokers with a substance use disorder have also been found to have an increased risk of relapse. So we did discuss that that is a risk factor around cannabis use. So if someone stops smoking tobacco, but they continue to use another substance, including cannabis, their risk of relapse back to smoking tobacco is much higher. And again, the same can be said here. Okay. So yeah, people who have a substance misuse disorder are over 3 times more likely to smoke. So again, a similar question that we asked for the previous priority groups. Are there any considerations specific to tobacco dependency support for people with a substance misuse disorder? So are there any adaptations that we might need to put in place in terms of our delivery, or are there any other factors or things that we should be aware of or consider in our support to provide the best care and support to this group? I'll give you all a couple of moments to have a think, and if there are any particular kind of concerns or things that we would need to be aware of or consider when supporting this group, do feel free to type in the chat or share over the microphone. Yeah, absolutely, Mandy. So yeah, again, this group absolutely may need additional support and more regular calls. I think that's really important. You know, whether that's kind of more frequent calls or potentially considerations for extending their support after the program. I think, yeah, definitely applies to this group. Siobhan, yeah, safeguarding. So I suppose that could be, you know, lots of different things. It could be, you know, whether there's any kind of safeguarding concerns around the people potentially that they're associating themselves with, or potentially lack of kind of support around them potentially. Yeah, you mentioned ensuring they're receiving support for substance misuse. Absolutely. So, you know, really important that we kind of have that kind of joined up care approach in this. And yes, of course, our responsibility is to, you know, support individuals to stop smoking, but also if we're aware that there are substance misuse issues, then of course that may need to be reported, and of course we need to provide that opportunity so that individual can reach out for the appropriate support. So it's definitely worth being aware of what signposting we can put in place for those individuals to find those support services. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely agree with that, Siobhan. I think that's a great point. Let's have a look at some of the examples of what we should be considering when supporting these individuals. So yeah, we need to consider, of course, readiness to quit. So like smoking, substance misuse is often a form of self-medicating, an underlying issue. So to sustain a quit, that the cause needs to be managed. So yeah, we do need to think, are there any significant underlying kind of mental health concerns, any issues around kind of finance or kind of their social well-being that may need to be potentially addressed prior to or alongside supporting them to quit tobacco. So that may be important. Habit swapping as well. So these individuals may be more likely to increase use of other substances like alcohol or painkillers to substitute the one that they are actually quitting. This is often to achieve a similar effect that they were getting from either their tobacco use or the other substance that they are kind of removing or coming off. So really important that we really focus on those kind of healthy coping mechanisms, those healthy habits that can replace the habit of smoking, and ensure that they have that they're aware that, you know, it's possible that they may kind of move into some unhelpful habit swapping. So it's important to find some strategies to mitigate that and find some healthier alternatives. And also peer networks. So there may be an increased risk of relapse when peers often sabotage the quit attempt or trigger lapse through offering cigarettes or continuing to use cigarettes in front of them. So it's important when we talk about, okay, who have you got behind you to support you on this quit attempt? Who can you turn to for help? It's really important that we help individuals create a positive peer support network, so that they're surrounded by people who will support them to achieve their goals, rather than be surrounded by people who's only going to put barriers in front of them and potentially sabotage that quit attempt. So it's important simply to make participants aware that may be the case, and to discuss what positive support actually looks like and how they can use that more than potentially negative support that they may be experiencing already. So yeah, brilliant. Those are just some additional considerations for supporting people with other substance misuse disorders on a stop smoking program. Let's have a look at the next one. So another priority population is homeless. So smoking rates remain exceptionally high among adults accessing homeless support services. What we have here is just a bit of an infographic showing the proportion of rough sleepers across Great Britain. Yeah, I don't think we've got any data there for Northern Ireland just yet, but we can see in grey that shows regions where there's no data, but essentially the darker the shade of the red shows the higher numbers of rough sleepers within that region. So yeah, we can see, you know, potentially high proportions of rough sleepers potentially in kind of Scotland, the sort of southwest of Scotland. We can see some kind of pockets of kind of really high numbers of rough sleepers in the kind of east of England and dotted around the south of England as well. Southwest, I think we've got North Devon there as well. So smoking rates among the homeless show that between around sort of 60 to 80% of adults accessing homeless support services smoke. So again, that's significantly higher than the general population. So what we can say really is the rate of smoking is up to 4 times higher than the national average. And many people experiencing homelessness smoke at least 20 cigarettes a day. So again, similar to the mental health priority group we discussed yesterday, again, dependency on smoking is also likely to be higher within this group. And also amongst homeless populations, there are significantly higher rates of diagnosed respiratory health conditions, potentially attributing to the lack of access they may have to healthcare, the conditions where they may be living and sleeping, and potentially a few considerations that we'll have a look at on the next slide. So yeah, the latest figures that I was able to get from Shelter shows that at least 354,000 people were recorded as homeless in England from December 2024. So again, a significant population that, again, we should do what we can to support on our stop smoking services. And again, are there any considerations specific to tobacco dependency support for people experiencing homelessness that we should take into account on our programs? Any differences in the conversations that we might have? Some of the risk factors potentially? Again, feel free to type in the chat or share with the microphone if you have any thoughts. Yeah. Absolutely, Mark. So ability to access services. So yeah, for sure, you know, that they may not have access to a mobile phone, so it may be difficult to access remote appointments, or even just be aware sometimes that there are services, you know, um, around them that can support. So I think that's a really important point. Definitely, Mark. Any others? I'll just give it a few moments in case anyone has any other thoughts. Of course, we can think about homeless populations and thinking, you know, are there any other challenges that they might be experiencing um, that might potentially, you know, be ahead of smoking cessation? So that may come into it. Um, yeah, absolutely, Mandy. So yeah, of course, we should signpost to other services to help to rehome them. Absolutely. You know, certainly for a period of time, I've been a wellbeing for work coach, and it's important to consider, you know, what people need to make a significant behavior change, which of course tobacco cessation absolutely is. What do people need? They need to feel kind of, you know, relatively stable in terms of their kind of finances, but also they need to feel kind of safe and secure, you know, with a home, a safe place to live and things like that. So, you know, we definitely need to consider you know, what support services may be around them to address homelessness. Absolutely. So let's have a look at a few considerations kind of on that point. Whereas, as we know, smoking is one of the best things that people can do for their health, almost in absence of other kind of risk factors and other behaviors, even though we know it's super important and we are focusing on smoking cessation over these 2.5 days. Someone experiencing homelessness is likely to have high priorities than attempting a quit. It might be finding a bed to sleep tonight. It might be finding food. It might be, you know, lack of, you know, finance and resources and things like that. So again, as much as we can say, yeah, but you know, you're likely to save some money from stopping smoking. Yeah, but think about your health. Actually, there are going to be some absolutely justifiable things that the individual will be putting ahead of that smoking cessation attempt. So that's where, you know, signposting to other services, kind of having that interest in having a kind of wider approach to their overall well-being and situation is important, so that hopefully we can support them effectively to reduce their tobacco use or completely quit smoking thereafter, once we've supported them to find those other services. Absolutely. Access to support. So as Mark mentioned, there may be significant barriers to accessing regular services where tobacco dependency treatment is usually offered. So again, if they don't have access to a mobile device, as a lot of our services are remote or a kind of mixture of remote and face-to-face, that may pose some challenges. So really important, I know in lots of our kind of outreach activity that we are kind of widely spread across the local authorities that we are working in those kind of community centres, so that we can be as visible as possible to everyone within that area. Tobacco use behaviour. So in the way that homeless individuals may be using tobacco, there may be an increased risk of exposure to viruses and infectious diseases from cigarette sharing using discarded butts. So we mentioned yesterday that there's a risk of passing diseases such as tuberculosis, herpes, and things like that from sharing the mouthpiece of shisha and water pipes. So again, there may be some similarities with sharing cigarette butts. And alternative use. So there is quite high rates among homelessness of concurrent use of tobacco with other substances, whether that's cannabis or maybe some of the substances we referred to with the previous priority group, so alcohol and also opiates or non-opiate medications as well. Okay, so next part of looking into priority populations, everyone, is core 20 plus 5. So Smoking is associated with every indicator of disadvantage, and of course, as we've started to establish, really is a leading risk factor of health inequalities. And it's really important that we share with you all Core 20+5, because often it's increasingly forming the basis of the services that are being commissioned now, where we are being asked to focus on the areas which Core 20+5 refers to. So what I'll do, I'll go through each step of Core 20+5, which hopefully will give you a little bit more information around, again, some of the populations that we are likely to prioritise on our services, in addition to what we've already discussed. So Core 20 refers to the most deprived 20% of the national population, as identified by the National Index of Multiple Deprivation. So again, I know in our services, Norfolk and I think Leeds are specifically targeted against supporting individuals within areas of their local authority that are identified as being the most deprived 20% of the national population. And this is to support those with low socioeconomic status that may again have identified challenges in accessing healthcare support, in making these healthy behaviour changes, to try and support them to do that. Next, we've got plus, and there isn't necessarily a particular kind of identified grouping within plus. Essentially, plus is local authority identified groups that they feel need support in their area. So plus can include lots of different groups, including ethnic minority communities, people with learning disabilities, people with autism, or long-term health conditions, or it could include groups or communities that may be more isolated, such as kind of rural and coastal communities. It could include people experiencing homelessness, people with drug and alcohol dependence, vulnerable migrants, Gypsy, Roma and traveller communities, sex workers, people in contact with the justice system, victims of modern slavery, and other socially excluded groups. It's not necessarily the case that in every local authority all of these are a priority, but these will be identified at a local area in which of these priority populations, potentially more as well, will need to be focused on in terms of health promotion support in their area. And finally, we've got 5. So 5 refers to the top 5 really key clinical areas of health inequality. And these include maternity, so supporting pregnant smokers, also smokers that are breastfeeding, and indeed helping the kind of partners and people living in the household of a pregnant person, or someone who's breastfeeding as well. Severe mental illness. So again, we spoke about the mental health priority group yesterday. That's one of the key areas of health inequality as well. Chronic respiratory diseases as well, COPD, bronchitis, emphysema, early cancer diagnosis, and also high blood pressure case finding as well. So if a individual is identified within any of these groups, it's likely that they are going to be prioritized in some way by local tobacco control services to help reduce health inequalities across the UK. Any questions about Core 20+5 or any of the priority populations that we've discussed so far? All good, all good. I think we'll do one more slide, everyone, and then we'll pause for a proper break. I know I quite like to brew a coffee before we move on to addiction and dependence, and it will be nice to finish this section before we move on to another one. Just the final priority population that I'm going to highlight is LGBTQ plus. So again, this may be one of the priority populations. Some of you may, expect this, but some people may think, well, actually, I wasn't aware that that's a priority population for tobacco services. So it's understood, although there is limited research at the moment, it is relatively understood that members of the LGBTQ plus community report higher rates of smoking than the general population. And this kind of relatively basic graph helps to kind of identify that really. So interestingly, among gay and lesbian populations and also those who identify as bisexual, they have roughly a smoking rate, respectively, of around 23%, 23.1, 23.3%. And we compare that with those who identify as heterosexual or straight or other sexual orientation, with 15.9% and 17.3% respectively. So we can see that there's sort of a kind of a sort of 50% increase in smoking rates among those who identify as gay, lesbian, and bisexual. Why might we think that's the case? Would anyone like to suggest any reasons why in certain sexual identities, smoking rates are slightly higher than heterosexual and straight sexual orientation? Feel free to take a few moments to consider, and feel free to type in the chat or share the microphone if you have any thoughts. Is a potentially quite a tricky question, and this is quite a new kind of priority group that's come in just in the last kind of year or so, really. I can see some typing, so I'll just pause for a few moments. Yeah, absolutely, Mark. So you mentioned these groups face more societal barriers and may look to smoking as a way to relieve stress. So we have already discussed when mentioning some of the priority populations, and you may have discussed this in some of the kind of behavior change content that you've gone through over the past sort of day or so, that smoking is can be a way of self-medication for things like stress and anxiety and things like that. And we know that people in the LGBTQ plus community are more likely to face discrimination and prejudice as a result of their sexual orientation. And as a result, they may turn to smoking to relieve any kind of stress or anxiety that may cause as well. So research is quite limited at the minute. I expect that we'll learn more around supporting this priority group around tobacco dependency in the future, but definitely a really important one still to be aware of. Okay. All right, everyone. Any questions on priority groups? Any questions perhaps on what we discussed yesterday as well before Jason took over around pregnancy or mental health? But hopefully that gives you a bit of an indication in terms of not just thinking about our smoking cessation services as sort of general community support services, but how some of our services may, depending on the local authority, depending on the service, have specific targets to focus on these priority populations that we've just discussed. And hopefully that gives you a bit of information as well, how we can alter or modify our delivery to support those groups. So we're going to move on to addiction and dependence next, and this will be the final section before we move on to treatment that will aim to start after lunch. So kind of one more section before we move on to that. We're coming up to 10:30, so I do want to give us a proper break like we did yesterday. So if it's okay with everyone, let's pause for just over 10 minutes, if that's okay. Again, I like to come back on a round number, so let's come back at 10:40. Hopefully that's enough time to brew a coffee or tea or grab some refreshment, and we'll see you back at 10:40. Thanks, everyone. Hi, Ron. Hi, Mandy. Hi, Michelle. Okie dokie. Sorry, I mistimed a biscuit then. I thought I had a bit more time, but just had to speed eat a biscuit. Okie dokie. All right, everyone, welcome back. So in this next part of the session, we're going to be talking about addiction and dependence. So we're going to be talking about how kind of uptake of smoking starts. We'll talk about how uptake can lead to dependency and how dependency can become addiction. And we'll also touch on withdrawal symptoms as well. So again, hopefully a really interesting part of the training. Again, just as we start this next section, just a few questions to get us thinking. So these questions are all about nicotine addiction and withdrawals. So which is the most addictive component in tobacco? Do we think it's carbon monoxide, nicotine, or methanol? Feel free to shout out over the microphone or type in the chat. Which is the most addictive component in tobacco? Yeah. Yeah. Siobhan going nicotine, Michelle and Mandy agreeing. Yeah. Again, I think we're all agreeing with nicotine, and yeah, of course, absolutely right. Nicotine is, of course, the most addictive component in tobacco. Of course, carbon monoxide is produced through the burning of tobacco. We spoke about that yesterday. Menthol, methanol. Sorry, methanol isn't really in cigarettes anymore. But it used to be a component of cigarettes and tobacco. But yeah, certainly nicotine is the addictive element that we'll be talking about a little bit more in a few slides. And finally, who are more likely to experience addiction? People in deprived areas, people with mental health conditions, people who identify as LGBTQ+. So we're not talking about who's more likely to uptake tobacco, who's more likely to experience addiction. Do we think there's any one of these groups more likely to experience addiction, or um, or do we think potentially that they're all the same? So I think some of us going with all, some going with B, admittedly, because it is a bit of a cheekily asked question. I do like to give away a few hints. So admittedly, with this question, addiction doesn't discriminate. So if someone does take up a potentially addictive substance, there isn't really any kind of difference in its potential to become an addictive substance in different individuals. Of course, we can certainly have arguments. Of course, we've just discussed certain priority groups who are more likely to smoke more than others, such as kind of homeless and mental health and things like that. But the kind of potential for a substance to be addictive, yeah, is the same for everyone, absolutely. But yeah, good still to get us thinking. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. So factors that influence uptake. So we know that people in the most deprived areas are more than twice as likely to smoke than people in the least deprived areas. What are some of the risk factors for uptake of tobacco use? What are some of the factors essentially that lead someone to take their first cigarette and potentially for that first cigarette to become routine? It could be we want to think overall. So, what are all the different factors or uh, pulls that may lead someone to use tobacco? So, I've got a few good ones coming through. So, Siobhan, absolutely right. You mentioned stress. So, absolutely, people may hear perhaps from others that they smoke to relieve stress, so they themselves may think incorrectly that, okay, if I start smoking, that's going to help me to manage my stress. So absolutely that kind of self-medicating a underlying health issue. Mandy, you mentioned peer pressure. Absolutely. So a desire to fit in with a certain group could absolutely be a factor. And Mark, yep, seeing peers and family members smoking. So yeah, that kind of parental influence. Okay, if my mum and dad smoke, then surely it's a good thing to do. And Siobhan agreeing with parents as well. Yeah, Mandy, all of those are relevant. Yeah, stress, anxiety, depression can potentially lead people to smoking. And Michelle, yeah, wanting to fit in with friends, absolutely. So, people really do feel sometimes that, if they don't, that if they smoke, that's their key into a certain group. That's their key to a really positive kind of social well-being. But of course, it's really that there are lots of other ways to fit in instead of using smoking. Yeah, absolutely, Siobhan. So it could be misinformation or advertising. So of course, smoking used to be very fashionable and encouraged. Absolutely. So you mentioned even in the 1980s, there used to be billboards to encourage smoking. Absolutely. Historically, people thought smoking was healthy and things like that. So there's lots of misinformation and kind of media and advertising influences as well. So, yeah, so some really great points, everyone. I think we're going to just summarize the points that you've raised on this slide. So, we've got here just kind of general misinformation. So again, people used to incorrectly think that smoking used to, help tackle certain diseases or conditions and things like that. Of course, we absolutely know that there's no benefit to smoking tobacco, but that there certainly used to be that general misinformation that, of course, has, certainly influenced generations to take up use of tobacco. Also, culture and social status. So we spoke yesterday about, kind of that cultural competency around certain cultures where certain ways of using tobacco is quite prevalent. So certainly in kind of Middle Eastern cultures and South Asian cultures, shisha, water pipes, hookah are quite prevalent. Also in certainly Asian cultures as well, even from young ages, chewing tobacco is quite prevalent as well. Also, we've got media influence. So, of course, it is less and less now. We do see kind of visuals of people smoking on films and TV. I think that has reduced a little bit, although it hasn't completely disappeared. But certainly, as Siobhan mentioned, used to be on billboards. It used to be kind of advertised, just like the way that, gambling is still advertised in sport. That may be go out of fashion in the future. Similarly, in the past, we would have tobacco companies and cigarette brands on kind of advertising and things like that. So yeah, media influence, seeing kind of potential role models smoking can be an influence. Famous actors, people in the kind of public sphere smoking can be a significant influence for sure. So what we've got here are just some results from a study that was completed quite a while ago now, 2011, but still I think it's good to kind of reference some of the reasons why people do take on tobacco. So this study looked at the role of family and peers and the initiation and continuation of smoking behavior. And within this study, they found that 2/3 of people started smoking to self-medicate for reasons that you've already mentioned in the chat. So I think, Siobhan, you mentioned stress. Mandy, you also mentioned anxiety and depression. 17% said that they took up tobacco or cigarettes due to parental influence, as again, a number of you have already mentioned. And 57% mentioned peer pressure was a factor in taking up tobacco use as well. So yeah, lots of different risk factors for the uptake of tobacco use. And yeah, this is a good reference point. I think much of this information is still relevant now to tell us why people take on tobacco and continue to use it. So next, what happens when someone uptakes tobacco? The next step potentially is dependency, and factors that can kind of facilitate that uptake to kind of dependency. That there are many factors: environmental, socio-demographic, and psychological factors. All of these can determine the risk of single use of tobacco becoming dependency. So it's worth just kind of sharing this kind of central model first to show us how the first try can lead to dependency. So often when someone tries to have a cigarette for the first time, that may lead to experimentation. So they may think, oh, hang on a moment, do I like it? Do I not like it? Let's, have a few more cigarettes or use tobacco a few more times to see how I really feel about it. And then from experimentation, the kind of model branches out either into social use. So individuals may only smoke in situations where they're around other friends who smoke, or maybe, when they're out drinking or other social occasions. Or indeed, some people may turn that experimentation into regular use. So that's habitual smoking throughout the day and or night. What often happens, so after a while, after a period of time of smoking socially or regularly, of course someone might try to stop smoking. We know that over the course of someone's kind of smoking behavior, there are multiple attempts to stop or reduce smoking. So of course there may be a cessation attempt coming in quite early on. There of course is one potential result of cessation, and we know we'll come on to it in a minute. It does take quite a number of attempts for someone to try and stop smoking before it actually leads to stopping tobacco use completely. Often what happens when someone does try to stop smoking, particularly in those early attempts, is that they reuptake smoking, and their smoking becomes regular use again. Often we find that when someone tries to stop smoking, but then they fully relapse, they smoke either the same as what they did before. Sometimes they may actually become even more dependent and smoke even more. And that can become a bit of a kind of vicious cycle. And then that will lead to that individual becoming dependent on smoking. Of course, what may happen is we may break the cycle at some point in one of those quit attempts, and that may lead, we can see on the kind of left-hand side of this model that of course, if someone is successful in their cessation of tobacco, then of course they can move to becoming non-dependent on tobacco. But until that happens, it very much is a bit of a kind of vicious cycle of regular use, a stop smoking attempt, reuptake, back to regular use, and so on until we can break that cycle, which we'll come on to in a moment. And there are various factors that can influence this dependency on smoking. Extrinsic factors, which we're not necessarily in control of, but also intrinsic factors that we absolutely can control. Some extrinsic factors can include in our social kind of environment, in terms of our social well-being, that parental influence or sibling, other kind of family influence. It could be the values and attitudes of the people around us towards the use of tobacco. And also socioeconomic status. We know that lower socioeconomic status can lead to a higher risk of dependency. And also psychosocial. So again, peers and friendships, connectedness to the school and home, and sense of alienation. These are all factors as well that can lead to dependency. Some of these factors can be both extrinsic and intrinsic. So if we were to turn some of these factors into intrinsic factors, in terms of our own beliefs and values, that could relate to our own inner feelings about needing to smoke to fit in with a friendship group, or fit in with, or get along with other people. It could be a desire, an internal desire to feel connected to school or home, and also a desire not to feel alienated or isolated. So those may be some kind of internal feelings, beliefs and values that may also lead to that dependency. And also biological. So there are some there is some research out there around kind of the genetics and dependency of certain substances and behaviors such as tobacco. Prenatal exposure as well can lead to dependency, and also the different kind of factors that come into play throughout puberty and adolescence as we're kind of developing. Those can all potentially lead to those risk factors around dependency as well. So yeah, lots of different factors. It's quite a complex picture. Definitely not a kind of simple, one or two kind of risk factor situation in terms of determining dependency. It's definitely a complex picture of lots of different things that can lead to someone becoming dependent on tobacco. Any questions there on those factors and dependency so far? Okay, so we've learned now some of the factors that may lead someone to have that first cigarette and kind of essentially that other things coming in to increase the likelihood that that becomes dependence. As we know, nicotine is highly addictive, and it's the substance that keeps you hooked on tobacco. But how can we tell that someone might be dependent on tobacco? Are there any signs or symptoms that may present from a smoker or a tobacco user that may indicate to us or others or themselves that they are now dependent on tobacco? Is there anything that we might draw on or we might see in those individuals that may lead to us believing that they're dependent? Yeah, definitely, Mark and Mandy. So you mentioned potentially some kind of behavioral changes. So that may be kind of regular smoking at certain times of the day. So that could be feeling the need to wake up during the night to have a cigarette. It could be, scheduling regular cigarette breaks and almost kind of forming other activities around those cigarette breaks. Yeah, absolutely, Michelle. There could be some kind of irritation or snappiness when someone hasn't had a cigarette for a little while, potentially showing signs of withdrawal. Absolutely. I'll just give it a few moments in case anyone else has any other thoughts, but those are some good suggestions already. Okie dokie. Let's go through a few examples. Yeah, those are already some great ones already suggested. So someone who may indicate tobacco dependence may experience strong cravings, and that could include difficulty concentrating and potentially waking during the night when nicotine has been depleted. There may also be changes in mood, such as feeling restless or irritable, potential for increased anxiety, or changes or volatility of mood. Also bodily responses. So there may be an increased loss of appetite, excessive sweating, nausea, or abnormal digestion if someone has potentially not had a cigarette in a little while, that's definitely an indicator of dependency. And also, there are different behavioral patterns that could develop in someone who is dependent on tobacco. So they may prioritize smoking, at certain situations when waking. So you will have discussed with Jason that heaviness of smoking index that we use to assess dependency on our programs. So we know that the sooner someone has a cigarette after they wake up, potentially the more dependent they are. But they also may associate smoking with after a meal or after breakfast. If they're waiting for something, that may be a cue for them to be thinking about having a cigarette. As soon as they've been in a situation where they haven't been able to smoke, such as going on a plane journey or on a long train journey, perhaps, the first thing that they might think of doing is getting their roll up prepared so they can light it as soon as they exit the airport or exit the train station. So those may be kind of behavioral kind of indicators of dependency as well. Interestingly, nicotine is believed to be as addictive as cocaine and heroin, meeting the clinical criteria for a dependence-inducing drug. So that's really interesting. We may absolutely consider kind of cocaine and heroin to be kind of much more harmful. But in terms of nicotine, certainly that addiction potential is very kind of comparable to cocaine and heroin. And also because nicotine is much more accessible than cocaine and heroin, that also can support its potential to be a dependence-inducing drug as well. So assessing dependence, I think you will have gone through this in a lot more detail, I think, on the content that Jason will have delivered. But just as a reminder, in terms of assessing dependence, the heaviness of smoking index is the main kind of tool that we use to assess level of dependency in individuals. We also have that Fagerstrom 6 measure test for nicotine dependency as well. Why do we need to assess dependence? Why is it important for us to assess dependence in individuals accessing our services? So again, this may be a bit of a recap possibly of the content you've already covered, but always good to highlight why we do HSI at the start of a program, why we need to know to what extent someone is dependent on smoking. Just give it a few moments for any thoughts to come through. Absolutely, Mark. So yeah, for sure, high dependence is a barrier to smoking cessation. It's not something that can't be overcome, but of course we need to use that information to inform the type of support, the tools and things like that that we should be using or encouraging the participant to think about when trying to stop smoking. Absolutely. Yeah, Michelle, we want to give the correct level of nicotine replacement treatment potentially. So what may kind of lead us to offer the first step of a patch rather than the second step of a patch potentially. Yeah, that's absolutely important. And yeah, I think Mandy agreeing with that point as well. So yeah, lots of really important reasons. So understanding individual nicotine dependence is key to managing withdrawal symptoms, and withdrawal symptoms are one of the main reasons for relapse back to smoking. So finding the appropriate dosage of nicotine replacement treatment, as you've already suggested, is absolutely crucial. Participants may misinterpret symptoms of nicotine withdrawal as a reaction to their treatment choice, for example, associating headaches with use of nicotine lozenges. So assessing dependence really does help us to ensure that we're offering the appropriate treatment to manage those withdrawal symptoms that we expect when someone's stopping smoking, and also to help us determine whether considering the treatment that we've offered, if someone is experiencing symptoms from stopping smoking, is it due to the treatment, or is it potentially due to the withdrawal symptoms that aren't being effectively managed by the treatment? And also, we should assess dependence so that we can provide that informed kind of advice on the benefits of using treatment, nicotine replacement treatment, vapes, or indeed prescription medication correctly, so that they can manage those withdrawal symptoms as best as they can. Of course, it's not necessarily just apologies, I've got some birds making a lot of noise outside. Apologies if that's coming through. I know these microphones are quite good at blocking out noise, so let me know if it is distracting. In addition to heaviness of smoking index, again, as you'll have already learned, there are other ways to assess dependence, and that could be doing a carbon monoxide test, because sometimes that can be used to assess level of dependency. For example, if someone blows a carbon monoxide reading of 10 parts per million or below, that might indicate low dependency. If someone blows a 20, 25 or above, that would indicate, high dependency on smoking. So that can also come into it. Also, an assessment of social reinforcement. So, of course, understanding whether or not an individual's kind of social environment is going to facilitate smoking cessation or potentially become a barrier could also be a factor in that dependency. And also professional judgment, so that combination of measures and tools can hopefully provide you as an advisor with with all that you need to make that professional judgment as to the appropriate treatment plan to support that individual according to their dependency on tobacco. Okay. All right. So we've spoken about dependence. Now we're going to start to think about how dependence can become addiction. But before we do that, we're going to actually talk about the similarities and differences between addiction and dependence before we focus on addiction. So it's important just to highlight here the definitions of dependence and addiction. So dependence can be defined as a physical reliance on a substance, causing the body to adapt in response to continued use, reliance on the substance to function normally, withdrawal symptoms in absence of the substance, and cravings for the substance linked to condition responses such as an event or feeling. So, after meal times, before bed, in a certain social situation, and so on. Addiction is caused by biochemical changes in the brain characterized by behavioral changes, including priority of the substance above health and well-being, acting irrational at times when the level of the substance is low or no longer in the body, or indeed alteration of the pleasure and reward system. That point is quite interesting in terms of that priority of the substance above health and well-being. So even if someone is really ill, in bed, maybe in hospital, they still will, if they're addicted to a substance, they still will prioritize using that substance, bringing those levels back up over, potentially getting better, even if they are incredibly unwell. So that's a really interesting point there around addiction. Let's have a look at how kind of addiction works in terms of use of tobacco and nicotine. So addiction can develop, of course, the first step is taking that first tobacco product, whether it's smokeless tobacco or that first cigarette. And then the nicotine activates receptors in the brain. They're called alpha-4 beta-2 receptors, nicotine receptors in the brain. And once nicotine binds to those receptors release dopamine. And we may be familiar with dopamine. It's that kind of feel-good chemical that's released when we exercise, maybe when we treat ourselves to something that we enjoy. Dopamine is associated with feeling positive. Of course, that dopamine makes us feel kind of positives. It kind of lifts us up. However, dopamine levels don't last very long. So dopamine levels drop pretty quickly within sort of 20 to 30 minutes, if not a little bit sooner. And that, of course, leads to withdrawal. So as dopamine levels drop, withdrawal increases. So the individual thinks, hang on a minute, I liked how I was feeling a few moments ago when dopamine levels were higher. I'm not liking these withdrawal symptoms. What's missing? Oh, yes, I had a cigarette. So I'm going to have another cigarette. And thereafter, this kind of circle is established. Interestingly, the more someone smokes, the more nicotine receptors become available in the brain. Therefore, the higher potential for someone to experience withdrawal cravings, and therefore, the more someone needs to smoke, not to feel high, not to feel positive, but just to manage those withdrawal symptoms. So, that's a really, I think, interesting part of the addiction. The more someone smokes, the more receptors there are, and the more they need to continue smoking just to manage that withdrawal. Okay. What I'm just going to share with you here is a quick slide. I'm just going to skip a few slides actually, just because it's helpful to cover this one first. Interestingly, cigarettes are, designed and manufactured and engineered to rapidly deliver nicotine. There is nothing better out there than cigarettes to deliver nicotine into our bodies. Okay, we of course already learned yesterday about the kind of different components of cigarettes, and what we've got here on the right hand side is just a graph showing plasma levels of nicotine over a day, a potential typical day of someone who is smoking. What we've got here, you can see this kind of pale blue band that goes throughout this graph. When levels of nicotine go above that level, an individual is experiencing pleasure. When within this band is called the neutral zone, and if nicotine levels fall below this pale blue band, we're going to experience, or the individual's going to experience abstinence symptoms or withdrawal symptoms. Okay, so we can see that individuals aren't smoking to feel high or to feel positive. It's always a battle against that withdrawal. So we can see at the start, yes, that the frequency is quite high, where someone takes on a cigarette, they increase their nicotine levels, but very quickly it drops afterwards. We can see those peaks and troughs. Those peaks and troughs get closer together throughout the day, where as we go throughout the day, that kind of battle increases to try and keep those nicotine levels high, to try and stop those withdrawal symptoms from occurring. And we can see that the plasma nicotine levels do not drop very low. Below that kind of neutral zone because of those withdrawal symptoms. So as soon as the individual experiences those, withdrawal symptoms, quickly they feel, right, I need to have a cigarette. And therefore those nicotine levels spike up again, but drop very quickly thereafter. We can see, as I say, throughout the day, the peaks and troughs get narrower. So where as someone may be smoking a cigarette, maybe kind of every half an hour at the start of the day, that may reduce to maybe 15 minutes or 10 minutes potentially as the day goes on. We can see as we kind of move into nighttime that nicotine levels, of course, drop well into the abstinence zone where the individual is going to be experiencing withdrawal symptoms. So if someone is very highly dependent on smoking, then of course that may trigger them to wake up during the night to get back into that neutral zone. So just an interesting graph just to kind of show in action, really, an example of how cigarettes kind of deliver nicotine and how that links to that kind of cycle of addiction. Okay. And as we mentioned yesterday, approximately 1 to 2, 1 to 3 milligrams of nicotine is extracted from each cigarette as well. Okay. So again, similar to the kind of dependency model we looked at earlier, we're just going to have a look at the cycle of addiction here, which looks at the different stages of addiction and behavior that leads to addiction. So nicotine in tobacco provides a combination of positive and negative reinforcement. Of course, as we've already established, addiction has to start with that initial use, which can lead to frequent use or experimentation. Then a tolerance, so that's where potentially we're going into kind of more regular use of smoking, which can lead to dependence. Dependence thereafter leads to addiction. However, at certain points of someone's smoking habit, there are going to be various quit attempts. Sometimes they might be successful. However, sometimes people may relapse, and then what happens thereafter is they go back to that initial first use of smoking again, and thereafter that the cycle continues. Okay, it's quite similar to the dependency model we had a look at earlier. Other triggers for the kind of addiction potential of tobacco and cigarettes is celebration, so associating smoking with certain positive events potentially, but also boredom as well. We've already spoken about peer pressure. And also relationships, potentially feeling, the need to maintain a relationship through the use of tobacco could, of course, encourage people to develop that addiction. Again, much of this we've already discussed, but the key aspect on this slide is really how do we break the cycle? Okay, how do we break the cycle of addiction? And one thing that individuals can do to help break that cycle of addiction is, of course, seek support. So we know that smokers are up to 3 to 4 times more likely to quit smoking with specialist support, where, as you'll have discussed with Jason, the different aspects of specialist support that we can offer through professional guidance, through a variety of treatment options, through various self-help tools that individuals can use outside of the appointments within our services. Potential for peer support groups that I know Jason at the end mentioned. We are looking at kind of developing further in the future. Offering harm reduction, so even where people may not feel able to abruptly stop smoking straight away, but may feel confident to cut down their use of tobacco, that also should be encouraged to help someone break that addiction over maybe a slightly longer time, 6 weeks rather than 2 weeks with abrupt cessation. And of course, personalized care, so taking into account having that person-centered approach, making sure we consider how we need to adapt our delivery to certain groups, to certain priority groups as well, certain individuals, is really important. What that leads us on to is just to kind of go through withdrawal symptoms in a little bit more detail. So we've established that when someone is dependent and then becomes addicted to nicotine, withdrawal symptoms occur when nicotine levels reduce or are stopped completely. And this is caused by a reduction in the dopamine released by the brain as nicotine receptors become understimulated and start to shut down. Is anyone aware of any common withdrawal symptoms that people may experience when they stop smoking? We've already potentially suggested 1 or 2 already in our conversation so far, but feel free to share in the chat or share the microphone if there's any more that you can think of, any withdrawal symptoms at all that people might experience. Cool. So let's have a look. Yeah, Michelle, you mentioned anger. So yeah, absolutely changing mood, kind of negative feelings. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely, Mandy. Sleep disturbance, insomnia can be a withdrawal symptom. Absolutely, Mark, irritability, and yeah, definitely agree with that one as well, Michelle, with restlessness. So yeah, all of those are common symptoms of withdrawal. So I think we're just going to summarize and confirm those here. So yeah, feeling irritable or angry, feeling tired or having difficulty sleeping, headaches, feeling nauseous, increases in anxiety and low mood, and of course cravings as well for nicotine. Those are all potentially going to increase in the first couple of days really of stopping smoking. Okay. So, of course, later on in this session, we are going to talk about strategies, of course, using treatments to manage withdrawal symptoms. So, of course, effective use of treatments can minimize withdrawal symptoms. And it's important to say that withdrawal symptoms shouldn't last more than 4 to 6 weeks following a successful quit attempt. It's likely that withdrawal symptoms are going to be much higher in the first 2 or 3 days of quitting, and over the subsequent 4 to 6 weeks, they should dissipate as long as the individual stays quit, follows that not a single puff rule, and continues to use their treatment effectively as well. Okay, just a final slide on this section, everyone. So we're just going to touch on factors that make it difficult to quit. So interestingly, research from the CDC in America found that it can take up to 11 independent quit attempts to be successful. That's not necessarily 11 quit attempts with a specialist stop smoking service, such as the services that we deliver. This is inclusive of those ad hoc attempts to quit cold turkey without support, potentially purchasing some NRT individually, giving that a go. So lots of different kind of methods that those quit attempts can include, really. So what factors might interfere with a participant's quit attempt? What might make it harder for someone to actually quit? Just give you a few moments to consider. In answering this question, we may consider some things that we've already discussed in this section. We may think about different influences upon individuals when trying to quit smoking. We'll just see what thoughts we have coming through. Let's have a look. So yeah, Mark, yeah, unexpected stressful situations, absolutely. So we do encourage throughout a quit attempt that we do spend time with participants talking about high risk situations, things that may come in the future that may make it more difficult for someone to stop smoking or continue their quit. But of course, if a stressful situation is unexpected, that hasn't been planned for, or maybe comes quite early in the quit attempt, of course, they can be quite challenging to manage. Mandy absolutely may have a lot of stresses going on in their life already. So of course, we do want to encourage participants to develop those healthy coping mechanisms, those healthy stress management techniques. But of course, it takes time for those to develop and become habitual. And even though we know smoking isn't going to help manage their stress, their learnt behavior is that when they smoke, they do just slightly have that reduction in stress or irritability. We know that that's not reducing stress. We know that that's just a reduction in withdrawal symptoms, but because they already have that learnt behavior, you know, lots of stressors absolutely could be an impact for sure. Yeah, pressure from others, of course, that could be stress coming from others or pressure from others not to quit. So unhelpful kind of communication from people that should be supporting that individual but actually are hindering the quit attempt potentially. Yeah, absolutely. Associating, Mark, smoking with positive situations. So it could be birthdays, parties, or positive social gatherings with others that people will previously have associated with smoking. Yeah, Siobhan, you mentioned motivation. Absolutely. So, again, I think you'll have learned that, in the content previously, most people accessing our services will be at that contemplation stage of kind of readiness to achieve a behavior change. But of course, some people may access our service actually saying, I've been told to come here by my GP, or my midwife has asked me to access a service. I don't know why I'm here. I want to continue smoking and things like that. So, whereas lots of people will have already considered their motivation, yes, motivation may be lacking in some individuals. And of course, motivation can change over the course of a quit attempt as well. So, lack of motivation can be an impact. And yet, Mandy, absolutely, celebrations coming up as well can be a factor. So, yeah, let's have a look at these different factors, which are all absolutely important to consider so that we can hopefully manage them and support people to manage throughout a quit attempt. So we've got withdrawal symptoms, nausea, fatigue, insomnia, appetite, mood, and craving. So if those withdrawal symptoms aren't managed effectively, then that absolutely can affect a quit attempt for sure if there aren't appropriate coping mechanisms or appropriate levels of treatment being used in the correct way. Then we've got routine and habit. So, it takes time to break down old unhealthy habits and create new healthier habits. So, of course, it will take time to break that cycle of changing a routine, introducing other coping mechanisms or healthy habits. That does take time. Then we've got social factors, including peer pressure, culture, and feeling the need to be included and feeling that tobacco use is the key to that inclusion. Other substance use, so we've already established that if someone continues to become dependent on other substances such as alcohol, even caffeine, cannabis, and opioids, that can increase the risk to relapse. And also mental and physical health. So, if someone is experiencing pain and they're uncomfortable, of course, that's going to reduce either their kind of motivation or desire or ability to make a significant behavior change. Also, if someone experiences anxiety, and if someone self-medicates their anxiety or low mood with smoking, of course, those might interfere with the participant's quit attempt. So it's really important here to actively listen to what's important to each individual participant, and this is key to providing effective support. So again, you will have discussed kind of motivational interviewing and appropriate communication techniques with Jason, and that really helps us to kind of identify these challenges so that we can start finding solutions early on so that we can ensure as much as possible that a successful quit attempt for the individual as possible. Okay. So that brings us to the end, everyone, on addiction and dependency. Hopefully that's provided a bit more information, everyone, in terms of how thinking about smoking, how uptake starts, how uptake can lead to dependency, how dependency can lead to addiction, and the role of nicotine within that addiction, and also talking about withdrawal symptoms as well. Any questions at all? Anyone? No? Okie dokie. So we are at 11:30. We're doing really well for time. What I suggest we do is kind of follow similar timings to yesterday. As we've already had a couple of breaks, maybe we could pause for just a shorter break between now and 11:35, if that's okay with everyone. And then we'll start tobacco treatments until maybe 12:30, where we'll focus on nicotine replacement treatment. Okay. If anyone's got any questions, do let me know. Otherwise, see you all back in just over 5 minutes at 11:35. Thanks, everyone. Okay, everyone, welcome back. We'll get started in the next few seconds. Yeah, just seeing your message, Jason. I've just felt my laptop myself, and I'm pretty sure it's nearly at melting point. So, yeah, it's running quite hot today. I've just myself upped the speed of my fan as well. So, yeah, it's very warm, very warm. So. Yeah, good to have plenty of breaks, and we're doing very good for time. I'm not going to say we finish early today, because every time I say that, it seems like I talk on for ages. So, but we're doing pretty good for time, and we'll just go for another hour. We'll go through nicotine replacement treatment, and whichever comes sooner, either the completion of nicotine replacement treatment or 12:30, whichever comes sooner will be when we pause for at least 45 minutes or so for a break for lunch. Okay. So now we're going to move on to tobacco treatment. So I think, not to be kind of biased, but for me, certainly kind of one of the most exciting aspects of this training. As you all will have gone through kind of NCSCT training, or at least kind of had a look through some of the NCSCT training, of course, hopefully you'll be all aware of some of the kind of main aspects of the treatment. So we'll aim to go into lots of detail today, so you have all the information you need to discuss these tobacco cessation treatments with your service users in the future. So as always, let's get started, everyone. We'll just start off with a few warm-up questions, if that's okay. So, does anyone know who is responsible for regulating smoking cessation treatments in the UK? Is it the UK Health Security Agency? Is it the National Institute for Health and Care Excellence? Or is it the Medicines and Healthcare Regulatory Agency? Which body do we think is responsible for regulating smoking cessation treatments in the UK? Cool. Interesting. So we've got A and B so far, UKHSA and NICE. We'll just see if there's any advance on those. So you may potentially remember yesterday afternoon, after going through the clinical incident reporting information, there's a yellow card scheme, and that's kind of led by one of these bodies. So that may lead us one way or the other. So I will uncover the answer now. The answer is actually the Medicines and Healthcare Regulatory Agency. Of course, UK Health Security Agency is in charge of a lot of the kind of government policy around health improvement in the UK, including the role of course, tobacco cessation services within the UK. NICE are responsible for many of the clinical guidelines, including the main guideline that we abide by and to inform our services. So NICE are a really important body. However, it is MHRA, the Medicines and Healthcare Regulatory Agency, that are responsible for regulating smoking cessation treatments. And again, MHRA are the body that are in charge of the yellow card reporting scheme. So if you identify any adverse reactions to any treatments with your participants, as well as reporting that through a clinical incident, either if you're Mandy and Michelle through your kind of local incident reporting procedure at the Leisure Centre, or if you're internal through our own clinical incident reporting process, ideally they should also be reported in the yellow card reporting scheme as well. Okay. Does anyone know how long NRT should be used for? We've got three options here. Should a course of NRT, nicotine replacement treatment, be 4 weeks, 8 to 12 weeks, or long term, not specified, just long term use? Okay, so Michelle going with A, Mark going with C. We'll just have a look to see if there's any advance on 4 weeks in the long term. Cool. Mandy going with B. We're covering all bases with this question. That's all good. All good. So there are two potential answers for this question, admittedly, again, just to be a little bit tricky. According to the NCSCT standard treatment program, the standard course of nicotine replacement treatment, that's potentially a combination approach to nicotine replacement treatment, patches plus a fast-acting oral product or secondary product. NCSCT standard treatment programs say that course should be 8 to 12 weeks. Okay. However, there is also a recommendation where on a case-by-case basis, where it's identified that longer term use of NRT will reduce the risk of relapse in certain individuals, such as individuals with severe mental illness and other potential priority populations, it's recommended that they use nicotine replacement treatment in the long term. On our services, we do have specific timeframes by which we're able to provide treatment. Usually that is within 8 to 12 weeks, admittedly. On 1 or 2 services, I think in Stoke, the course of treatment is only for 6 weeks. So we do want to encourage participants where we don't quite fit into that 8 to 12 week standard treatment program for NRT, that we do encourage participants to self-procure their own treatment thereafter to fulfill that recommended course of treatment, or if they feel that they need to continue treatment in the long term, let them know to go to a reputable retailer or pharmacy to secure more treatment afterwards. And we are going to come on to prescription only medications later on today. There are currently 3 prescription only medications available for supporting people to stop smoking. However, prior to 2020, 2021, there were only 2 prescription only medications available, but respectively, they were both at certain points, as say in the early 2020s, 2021s, withdrawn from the market. Does anyone know why those POMs, Champix and Zyban were briefly removed from the market? Was it due to the risk of nitrosamine impurities? So potentially there were an excess of above the recommended or maximum quantities of cancer-causing chemicals, or was it due to an increase of adverse reactions reported to the yellow card monitoring scheme? Again, this may be a little bit of a tricky one. We'll just hang on, see if we've got any questions coming through, any answers coming through. I think everyone's going with B so far. See some typing going on, so we'll just hang on a few moments. So I think, yep, Siobhan going with A. Well, I think I'll uncover the answers, and if anyone does have any other thoughts, do feel free to type in the chat. So the answer is A, risk of nitrosamine impurities. So Pfizer, who produced and still produce now Champix, because it's just returned, and the manufacturer of Zyban identified in their manufacturing processes that there was an excess of or a potential for above the recommended amount of nitrosamine impurities, cancer-causing chemicals within the medications that they were producing. It wasn't due to any adverse reactions reported to the yellow card scheme, not due to any impact on patients or people taking the medication, but it was just out of an abundance of caution. They halted the manufacturing process, reviewed their procedures and their processes, and now they are both on the market again, having rectified those issues. So we will talk about prescription only medications a little bit later on today, but that's good to know. It was out of an abundance of caution rather than any effects of the medication on participants who or patients who were taking them. Okay. So just kind of more widely, before we go into nicotine replacement treatment in a few slides' time, it's important to say that, yeah, behavioral support and medication or nicotine vapes have been shown to significantly increase rates of stopping smoking. And that's absolutely crucial. It's not one or the other, just behavioral support or just pharmacotherapy treatments. A combination of specialist behavioral support that we can offer on our services, plus offering these various treatments, can really significantly increase the rates of stopping smoking. Okay. And it's worth saying, I will probably repeat this later today, but according to NCSCT, first line stop smoking aids include combination nicotine replacement treatment, and we'll go through what that means a little bit later. I'll try not to give away the answer. So combination NRT is first choice. So is nicotine analog medications, that's prescription only medication, including varenicline and cytosine. And nicotine vapes for most individuals, again, are a first choice, first line medication option for stopping smoking. NCSCT identifies second choice options, still, options that we can recommend service users to use to help. They do increase quit rates, but are essentially second line to the ones we've already mentioned. And those are single NRT products. That's either using just a patch or just oral NRT products, those secondary products such as sprays and lozenges and things like that. And bupropion or Zyban is a second choice prescription only medication. So we would always potentially offer varenicline and cytosine for prescription only medication first, and bupropion would be the kind of third line, the second line option after those treatments. It's important to say that I'm aware that on services there is a slight difference in terms of what's being offered. So I know in Norfolk, in KCW, you are able to offer a range of treatments from vapes, NRT, and POMS. I think for Norfolk it's pretty much everything, and KCW, I think it's just Zyban that isn't offered at the moment. I know in Stoke that there's a lot of work being done in the background to get prescription only medications on the local kind of formula. However, I correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it is just nicotine replacement treatment and e-cig vouchers that you would be able to offer to service users. So that's not ideal. We want to offer the full range of treatments, but hopefully that may be something to come in the future, and still important for everyone to be aware of everything that's available. And just in this graph on the left-hand side here, we've just got some information here showing the efficacy of interventions. And at the top in the blue, they're both blue, sorry, in the darker blue, we have efficacy of either no support or brief advice only or brief advice plus medications. And in the second half of this graph, in the lighter blue, we have specialist support plus different medications and things like that. And we can see that combining stop smoking aids with behavioral support further increases success with stopping, far beyond just offering behavioral support and of course offering no support at all. So essentially, just to summarize it, I won't go through it in loads of detail, but offering specialist support plus medications far increases the efficacy of stopping smoking, and it will result in more successful quits. Okay. So let's move on to NRT. So nicotine replacement therapy, NRT, is the term used to describe the range of products that deliver therapeutic or pure nicotine to relieve withdrawal symptoms tobacco users experience when they quit. Would anyone like to suggest some of the benefits of using nicotine replacement treatment as an aid to stop smoking? I'll give you all a few moments. what are some of the, really positive elements of using NRT as a aid to stop smoking? Yeah, absolutely, Mandy. So yeah, using nicotine replacement treatment absolutely will result in a higher chance of quitting. Absolutely. It's not to say, of course, that choosing NRT is a kind of guarantee or the NRT will do the quitting for you. But yes, absolutely, it does increase the chances of quitting as long as the individual uses it correctly alongside behavioral support. And yet, Mark, with NRT, the user is still getting the nicotine without the other kind of 7,000 odd chemicals within cigarettes. Absolutely right. And that, of course, helps to manage withdrawal, as Michelle mentioned. And Mandy, of course, the nicotine replacement therapy offered alongside support from smoking cessation services absolutely is a really great combination to increase the efficacy of our interventions. Absolutely. So yeah, those are some really great benefits. Let's have a look. So as Mark mentioned, with NRT, you get the nicotine, but whilst avoiding harmful chemicals. So it provides a clean form of nicotine in lower and slower doses than tobacco products. It reduces withdrawal, so it provides a low level of nicotine to help manage unwanted effects of quitting, making success easier. It's really important saying we will look at this in a few slides' time. The goal of nicotine replacement treatment isn't to match the same nicotine delivery as cigarettes. It's to provide a lower and cleaner level of nicotine just to take the edge off those withdrawal symptoms, just to manage those withdrawal symptoms. And so, not to become addicted to another nicotine product. There is a much lower potential to become addicted to NRT than it is to become addicted to cigarettes. And we'll have a look at a graph that explains that in a moment. It eases the transition. So NRT products deliver roughly half of the nicotine that standard tobacco products do, compared with standard tobacco products such as cigarettes. And there's many options. So NRT is available in many different methods of delivery and different flavors. And there are, of course, some really quite discrete options as well. It's important to say that nicotine replacement therapy is safe for most participants. So NRT products have been licensed as a medicine in the UK since the late 1970s, and they're considered generally safe for most healthy adults, including young people over the age of 12, pregnant women, and for use while breastfeeding as well. So combination therapy, a combination of two nicotine replacement products is one of the recommended first line approaches for treating tobacco dependency. So would anyone like to suggest what products could be used as combination therapy? I may have inadvertently probably given the answer already, but do take a few moments to share in the chat or over the microphone what combination therapy actually means. What products do we use in combination? That's interesting, Mandy. So patches and a vape. So it is actually possible for individuals to use patches and vapes concurrently. However, we may want to consider another option for nicotine replacement therapy in place of the e-cigarette. We will talk about e-cigarettes separately later, but absolutely, individuals may want to use patches and e-cigs together if they wanted to. Yeah, Michelle, absolutely. So you mentioned NRT patch for slow release nicotine, absolutely, and either a spray or lozenge or gum for quicker release. Yeah, absolutely. That's definitely what we're aiming for. Absolutely. So that's what we mean by nicotine replacement trim. We will talk about prescription medication later on. You mentioned there, Mark, prescription medication with NRT and things like that. There is interestingly growing research and evidence for using NRT alongside prescription medications. However, in practice, that's not necessarily something that we would do at this moment in time. But there's definitely some innovations that may come in the future, which absolutely may taking into account that option that you suggest for sure. So yeah, what products could be used in as a combination therapy? So ideally a nicotine patch, which is a long-acting nicotine replacement therapy, paired with a quick or short-acting product. So nicotine patch plus either gum, lozenge, mouth spray, inhalator, or micro tab. I might be missing one, but yeah, that's the kind of general approach to combination therapy. Any other approach to NRT? So either patch on its own or a faster acting NRT product on its own would be counted as a single NRT therapy, and that would be a kind of second line option for NRT. Even if someone uses a gum and a spray, that's still kind of described as a single NRT approach because they're both the same or similar methods of delivery of nicotine. Okay. Let's have a look now at NRT effectiveness. So there is no evidence to suggest that any type of NRT is more effective than the other. It really is about personal preference in terms of, what type of, if NRT is the preferred option, it is all about preference in terms of what the individual may decide to use in terms of the different products available. All forms of NRT are beneficial to supporting a quit attempt as they're considered equally effective and yet can increase the overall quit rate by around 50 to 60%. What's the primary aim of using NRT? So we could split up the role of NRT into long-acting products and short-acting products. So what might be the aim of long-acting products and what might be the aim of the shorter, quicker acting products? Do take a few moments to have a think about that and consider those different roles there of the patches or the kind of shorter acting products. Absolutely, Mark. So you mentioned short-acting products can help with immediate, more intense cravings. So they're kind of like our sort of fast response kind of approach or emergency response. So, either in anticipation of or as soon as a kind of craving or an urge occurs, these products can work within sort of 10, 20 minutes to tackle those cravings. Absolutely. And yeah, Michelle, you mentioned longer acting products such as patches keep the nicotine levels steady throughout the day. Absolutely. And we use those fast acting NRT products to manage those urges that kind of come up on and off throughout the day. So yeah, those are absolutely some really good ways to describe long and short acting products. So yeah, long acting products provide a steady supply of nicotine to reduce overall withdrawal symptoms. And short-acting products help to manage cravings throughout the day by using them at intervals as and when needed. Now, I mentioned earlier that the goal of NRT isn't to produce exactly the same nicotine delivery as cigarettes. It is just to take the edge off these withdrawal symptoms to make a quit more manageable and increase the kind of efficacy or chance of quitting. So we just have this graph here showing the level of nicotine delivered over time, and we've got a comparison of cigarettes, sprays, gum inhalator, and kind of tablets. I think that's lozenges or micro tabs, and then we've got the patch at the bottom. So we can see quite clearly from the graph the line of showing cigarettes right at the top. We can see that cigarettes by far and away deliver more nicotine quicker and kind of sustain high levels of nicotine much more than other nicotine replacement products. We can see that spray is the kind of closest to cigarettes. So mouth sprays and nasal sprays are the closest to cigarettes in terms of the speed of delivery. So mouth sprays, the nicotine delivery kind of peaks within around 5 to 10 minutes. And then we see a kind of steady decline after kind of 10-15 minutes over the kind of subsequent hour after using the spray. We can see that gum, inhalator, and lozenges, they're not as fast in acting as the sprays, but they do deliver a relatively steadier supply of nicotine over a longer period of time than the sprays. And then we've got the patch, which kind of offers almost like a murmur or kind of vibration of kind of nicotine delivery over the course of either 16 hours or 24 hours, depending on the type of patch being used. And this level of nicotine is absolutely sufficient to manage withdrawal symptoms from stopping smoking. And however, we can see that because they deliver nicotine less effectively than cigarettes, they have a kind of reduced potential to become addictive to the individual using nicotine replacement products. Okay. Any questions there as we're kind of just introducing NRT? Any questions at all? No, all good. Okay, so just one more slide before we go into the different products in detail. So nicotine replacement products can be used as a short-term intervention or continued in the long term, as we established with those kind of warm-up questions for this section. In terms of short-term use, nicotine replacement treatment helps to manage those cravings that come up and are effective as an aid to quitting. And in terms of long-term use, NRT can help to prevent relapse, and the risks of long-term use are limited to just the potential for nicotine addiction, although there is arguably a lower potential of addiction for NRT compared to continuing to use tobacco or cigarettes. When considering whether or not to encourage someone to use NRT over a longer period of time, are there any particular priority groups that may in particular benefit from use of NRT beyond the kind of 8 to 12 weeks recommendation in the NCSCT standard treatment program? Any particular groups or smokers that may benefit from long-term use? Yeah, absolutely, Mark and Mandy. Yeah, people with severe mental illness, absolutely. Michelle, yeah, definitely agree with that one. I don't think I've got it on my slide, but I would definitely agree that there is a high risk of relapse following pregnancy. So, we could potentially encourage pregnant smokers to continue NRT postpartum to reduce risk to relapse. That definitely could be a valid approach with that group. So yeah, let's have a look at some of these priority populations that would benefit from longer term use in addition to what we've already discussed. So yeah, heavy or long term ex-smokers may benefit from a longer term use of NRT. Those with a mental health condition, as we've already established. Where there's a history of addictions or current addiction to kind of alcohol or other substances, and simply in any case where benefits outweigh any potential risks, people can use NRT in the longer term. Okay, cool. So before I go before we shine the spotlight on all the different NRT products available, let's just do a quick true or false quiz around NRT. Let's have a look. So true or false? NRT products are as addictive as smoking. Do we reckon that's true or false? Cool. Just give it a few moments for everyone to share their thoughts. So I think everyone's going with false so far. Siobhan going potentially with true. So NRT products, in fact, aren't as addictive as smoking. Most people using NRT products don't become dependent on them. In fact, one of the biggest problems with NRT is that people don't use enough of it for long enough. So, and as we learn from that graph in terms of nicotine delivery, NRT products have a much lower kind of nicotine delivery than cigarettes. So yeah, their potential for being addictive is much lower. Nicotine causes cancer. Do we reckon that's true or false? I think everyone's going with false. Just give it a few moments. So the answer is false. So yeah, nicotine doesn't cause cancer. It's the other toxic chemicals in cigarettes, such as tar and carbon monoxide, that can damage someone's health. Next, NRT can still be used by individuals who've had a heart attack. True or false? Cool. So I think everyone's going with true for this one. And the answer is absolutely true. So NRT has been shown to be safe in most people with heart disease. However, because nicotine can increase your heart rate and blood pressure, it's a good idea to talk to your GP before using NRT products. We would advise anyone really who's had a significant cardiovascular event, such as a heart attack within the last 4 or 6 weeks, to consult their GP before starting a smoking attempt, just to see if there's any medication that they're taking that may need to be adjusted for stopping smoking, or if there's anything like blood pressure that may need to be monitored more closely when they stop smoking. But of course, if someone has a risk or history of cardiovascular disease, of course, anything that can be done to help that individual stop smoking is going to be significantly beneficial to their health. And finally, NRT products contain less nicotine than the average cigarette. Is that true or false? So again, this is a bit of a tricky question, because I've told you all that NRT products are less potentially addictive than cigarettes. However, interestingly, NRT products do actually contain more nicotine than the average cigarette. So for example, patches can contain up to 25 milligrams of nicotine. A nicotine gum can contain up to 4 milligrams or 6 milligrams of nicotine. The differences in terms of the addictiveness is actually how much of that nicotine is being delivered into the blood plasma, and actually can potentially cause addiction. So actually, nicotine replacement products actually do contain more nicotine than cigarettes. They're just less good at delivering that nicotine and have a lower potential for causing addiction. So I do apologize. We have, over the last few slides, taken you on a journey around that point, around just kind of highlighting that NRT products are less addictive, but they do actually contain a bit more nicotine than the average cigarette. But hopefully that's relatively understandable, and the reasons why they're less addictive but contain more nicotine. Okay. Again, as we mentioned earlier, cigarettes are engineered specifically to maximize that delivery of nicotine. So, so that's the reason why. Okay. So we're now going to go through a bit of an overview of nicotine replacement treatment products. So again, I'm sure many of you will already be familiar with these products, but I'm just going to give you as much information as I can around each of these. There will be lots of questions, so you can kind of share your own knowledge around these products as well as we go through them one by one. Okay, so we're going to start off with patches, everyone. And the first question that I'd like to ask you all is, why might a participant choose patches? So why might either we encourage patches to be part of a kind of NRT treatment, or what are kind of some of the key reasons why someone might use patches? So that's a really great one to get us started, Siobhan. Easy to disguise. So patches are discreet. They can be, you know, quite easily disguised over clothing. Absolutely. Yeah, reduced cravings in the long term, absolutely. Releasing a steady dose of nicotine throughout the day, absolutely right, Mandy. So yeah, so some really good points there. They deliver a steady dose of nicotine throughout the day and or night if it's a 24-hour patch, and they're quite discreet to use, and they're quite simple to use as well. It's just a case of taking the patch out of the packet, taking the kind of backing away from the adhesive, and then placing the patch on your body. Does anyone know what some of the kind of best practice guidance we should be sharing with participants around using patches correctly? Is there anything that service users should consider to use patches correctly? Yeah, clean or clear skin, absolutely, Mandy. So yeah, ideally it should be placed on a clean, dry, non-hairy area of skin. It could be quite painful taking it off every day if it is a hairy piece of hairy area of skin. So yeah, that's an important consideration. Yeah, and make sure to change the patch. So, for example, if it's a 16-hour patch, making sure ideally that we tell participants to take the patch off at least an hour before they go to bed. If it's and then replace it first thing in the morning. And if it's the 24-hour patch, whether they put the patch on in the evening or in the morning, making sure they change the patch every single 24 hours. Mark, you mentioned if you get irritation, put the next patch on a different section of skin instead of on the same area. So yeah, it's really important in any case with each patch you put on that the patch goes on on a different area of the body. So the location always rotates around the upper body. So it could be the upper arm, chest, back, um, um, preferably upper body, and as I say, rotating the area every single day. Yeah, so those are some really good points, everyone. So yeah, the first point we've already mentioned, applied to clean, dry, non-hairy skin. Replace as advised every 16 or 24 hours. Rotate site with each use. And in terms of side effects, a rash or itching from the adhesive or trouble sleeping and stomach upset is common. However, what's not common is the redness becoming the patch leaving a kind of broken area of skin or significant soreness, or kind of spots or things occurring underneath the skin. That's likely to be potentially an allergic reaction to the adhesive of the patch. So if anyone reports that, they could either, as Mark suggested, rotate the patch to a different area of the body, or when the patches what you could do is encourage the participant to, when they take the backing away from the adhesive, allow the adhesive to dry a little bit before putting the patch on, as that can potentially reduce some of the impact of the adhesive. And then you can encourage to use some micro pore tape to stick the patch on instead of relying on that adhesive. It's worth saying that there are quite a few different patch brands. So there's Nicorette, Nicotinell, and Nicotin. Most of these should be available for you to request. And each brand uses a slightly different adhesive. So there may be one brand that some service users can tolerate, some that service users can't. So that's also just important to consider. Of course, if that kind of significant soreness, or where the skin is kind of breaking up because of the patch, isn't managed due to with those suggestions, then it's probably best just to not use the patch. Encourage a participant to stop using the patches and potentially go to a single NRT approach with maybe 2 oral products if that doesn't work. It's worth saying that if you weren't already aware, patches come in 3 steps. First step, which is always the highest strength, is either 25 milligrams for 16-hour patches or 21 milligrams for 24-hour patches. The second step is always 15 milligram for 16-hour patches and 14 milligram for 24-hour patches. And the final step, the lowest dose of patches, is always 10 milligram for 16-hour patches and 7 milligram for 24-hour patches. And the idea is that you work your way over the course of a quit attempt from the highest strength of patch you offer, depending on the individual's dependency, and work your way through the steps to either no patch at all by the end of the program, or certainly aiming for the lowest step but by the end of the program. Other considerations, of course, are that for pregnant individuals, we only offer the 16-hour patch and ensure that they take the patch off before they go to bed. Ideally, users of patches should shower before putting the patch on, as of course introducing kind of water may reduce the efficacy of the adhesive, so best to shower after putting the patches on, but always good to have some micropore tape handy if the patch falls off. It's best not to put more than 1 patch on per day, so if it falls off, as long as it's hygienic, it should be fine to just pop back on with some micropore tape. Mandy, yes. Yeah. Oh, sorry, I think you're on me.
Yeah, sorry. Did you say, I think you did, did you say we order it, so do we order a 2-week supply when we first, is that?
Yeah, so there should be a maximum of 2-week supply, certainly with NRT products, so no more than 2 weeks at one time, really. So
Yeah.
And patches usually come in 7 patch boxes, so usually you're kind of requesting 2 boxes of patches.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, no, really good question. Cool. I think that's everything in terms of patches. Of course, if any questions do arise, do let me know as we go through these products. But I think what we'll do next is move on to the next product, which is nasal spray. Okay, so we'll cover the sprays first. We'll touch on nasal spray. Again, similar questions moving forward. Why might someone use a nasal spray? Why might someone have a preference over nasal spray compared with some of the other secondary products that may be available? Yeah, Siobhan, again, relatively easy to use. So, with nasal sprays, it's a case of pressing down on the nasal spray to allow the kind of contents of the spray to kind of release, be ejected from the end of the nasal spray. Yeah, it's quick release. Nasal sprays are the fastest acting NRT product and can be hidden. So yeah, it's relatively discreet. Of course, it's something that you're poking in your nose and spraying sort of thing. So maybe slightly less discreet than patches, but it's relatively quick, something that can be done relatively discreetly. Absolutely. Yeah, great for someone who might not like the taste of things like chewing gum or lozenges. That's a good point as well. Yeah, mobile use, so this can be used anywhere. The nasal spray can just fit in your pocket or in a bag. Yeah, of course, if someone is sensitive to the adhesive on plasters, then of course they may be able to choose 2 oral products, and therefore nasal spray may be one of them. And yeah, yeah, if someone's worried about the taste of other products, nasal spray might be preferable. Yeah, all of those are really good options. So it is the fastest acting product. The peak of nicotine occurs with nasal spray within 5 to 10 minutes. Often used by heavier smokers for that reason. And yes, they're simple to use. Does anyone know any kind of best practice guidance we should give participants wanting to use a nasal spray? Just give it a few moments. Let's have a look. So if anyone's got any thoughts, feel free to type in the chat. Otherwise, let's have a look at what we've got on the slide. Yeah, so of course, we do want to advise participants, absolutely, Michelle, in terms of guidance around how many sprays per day. So the recommendation is 1 to 2 sprays in each nostril every hour, and a maximum of 64 sprays per day. Ideally, when spraying, you want to point the tip of the nose spray upwards at a 45-degree angle. So it's kind of angled towards the back of the nostril. And it's recommended not to sniff, swallow, or inhale while spraying. Adverse effects like sneezing, watery eyes, throat irritations usually subside after 2 days. That's kind of when you kind of get used to using it, really. It's important to say that nasal spray is kind of like a Marmite product. I mean, myself, for example, I use kind of nasal sprays if I notice I'm starting to get kind of flu symptoms or things like that. So for someone like myself, a nasal spray might be okay. But of course, spraying something into the nose can be really irritating for some people. It can cause sneezing, as we've suggested, kind of watery eyes and things like that. And of course, if someone does kind of ingest the spray, that kind of feeling on the throat is really not very pleasant. So some people may not enjoy nasal spray for those reasons, but it can be a really effective approach for those that can tolerate the nasal spray. Important to say that each spray usually contains about 1 milligram of nicotine. As we say, it's probably the most effective nicotine replacement treatment product. So that's why the amount of nicotine within the spray is lower than the other product. So it's around 1.5 milligrams of nicotine per spray. And that's a nasal spray. Let's do one more before we pause for a break. Let's complete the sprays and then we'll come back to the remaining NRT products after the break. So let's have a look at mouth spray. Why might someone use a mouth spray? Feel free to share in the chat if anyone has any thoughts. Interesting, Michelle. So yeah, potentially in terms of kind of holding the spray and kind of holding it to the mouth, potentially there is a similar action to smoking. So there may be some kind of habitual urge kind of management there potentially. Yeah, no, really interesting. Mark, yeah, absolutely. It is fast acting, not quite as quick as nasal spray, but still quick. Absolutely. Let's have a look at what we've got in on the slide. So yeah, it is fast acting. Usually nicotine levels will peak within 10 to 15 minutes. And often used again by heavier smokers. And again, it's still quite discreet and pretty easy to use as well. Does anyone have any thoughts in terms of what guidance we should offer participants in terms of using mouth sprays correctly? Give it a few moments and then we'll uncover what we've got on the slide. Yeah, again, we want to consider the dosage, how often individuals should use it, and absolutely we'll talk about the side effects as well in a moment. Yeah, that's all correct. Absolutely. Let's uncover those for us. So, yeah, of course, it's important to encourage people to use sprays regularly, enough to manage those kind of withdrawal symptoms and manage any urges or cravings that come up. And it's important that individuals use maybe around 1 to 2 sprays every 30 to 60 minutes and no more than 64 sprays per day. The aim is to spray towards the side of the mouth, so the inner part of the cheek, and avoid swallowing for a few seconds after using. I don't know if anyone's seen any adverts on TV or anywhere else advertising mouth sprays, but what you'll often find is within the adverts, they're spraying the mouth spray almost looking like it's going to the back of their throat. If someone sprays a mouth spray directly onto the back of their throat, that's going to be incredibly irritating and really unpleasant. So the idea also as well for effective kind of nicotine absorption is that individuals aim the spray to the inside of their cheek. That's where the nicotine is going to be most effectively absorbed in that kind of mouth lining, that kind of soft tissue. So both for comfort and efficacy, ideally spray it to the inside of the cheek, and avoid swallowing for a few seconds after using. If someone directly swallows the mouth spray, they're going to get indigestion, heartburn, and they're going to hiccup as well. Start to hiccup. So yeah, hiccups, mouth and throat tingling, changes in taste and nausea are common side effects. It's important to say that the mouth spray isn't like a refreshing mint spray that someone might use after a meal or something like that. This is quite similar for all the other products. There's quite a kind of peppery medicinal kind of sensation with these products, and it's really important to share with participants that these products are all medications. They're not necessarily things to enjoy like a spray, or we'll come on to in a moment, just a regular nice piece of non-nicotine gum. These are medicines designed to help tackle withdrawal symptoms and help individuals stop smoking. So they're not really supposed to be super pleasant. But mouth sprays do often come in minty flavor, so there is a sort of background mintiness to the flavor of these products. Yeah, mouth sprays usually come in, if I can remember rightly, I think 2 or 4 milligram dosages per spray. I think it's around 2 milligrams per of nicotine per spray. I might just want to double check that as I've forgotten. But yeah, it's around 2 or 4 milligrams per spray, really. Okay. So that brings us pretty much up to 12:30. We haven't completed the remainder. We haven't completed nicotine replacement products. We've completed the patches and the sprays, but when we come back, we will have a look at the inhalators, gum, lozenges, and micro tabs. We'll also have a look at, effective dosing of NRT, cautions and contraindications of NRT. And then we'll focus this afternoon on vapes and prescription only medications. What we'll do, we'll aim to keep the same timings that you had yesterday. So we'll aim for a break between 12:30 and 1:15. Does anyone have any questions before we pause for a break, or is everyone happy to pop off for a quick 45-minute break? Yeah. Nice one. All good. All right. Well, thanks everyone so far for this morning, and we'll see you all back. Hope you have a lovely lunch, and we'll see you all back at 1:15. All right. Thank you.